I'm Brian, and welcome to the Portal to the Infinite, as I am here in service to you all. So, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about how my spiritual path had begun. Now, this could be a 3 hour story because it's been over 3 decades. But what I want to do is really tell you where it had begun and who I was as a person at that time. Well, number one, I was 18 years old, so I was a teenager. Although I was never your typical teenager, I was always very mature and adult. I preferred hanging around with older people, discussing older topics, politics, business, you name it. That's who I was. Now, who was I spiritually? Well, I was pretty much, I'd say, agnostic. I was raised Catholic, but my parents never pushed it on me. They were wonderful, wonderful people. They're in spirit now, but I pretty much, religion didn't do anything for me, and so I didn't know what I was. So in my senior year of high school, I had contracted mononucleosis, which I was actually happy about because it meant that I got to stay home from school, which was great. Because I had a commute to get to school. I went to a private school. I had to take a train. But anyway, because of this and being home, my entire sleeping schedule got completely messed up. I was up late every night watching Star Trek and all the classic shows, and then, of course, sleeping in the morning because I didn't have to go anywhere. So what began happening to me was in the early morning hours, it was light out. I was suffering from, or I began to suffer from, what I now know was sleep paralysis. I didn't know what that was. I had absolutely no idea that it even had a name because I never experienced anything like it. But the disruption to my sleep schedule, turns out, was the culprit. Now, what's so spiritual about sleep paralysis? It's a natural phenomenon. When we go to sleep, our brain shuts down the connection to our muscles, basically so we don't act out our dreams. But what was crazy is that I began to feel myself being lifted off the bed, doing like somersaults in the air. I couldn't see anything but at that time. And then another time I would feel myself, I'd say, oh, here we go again, lifting off the bed, and I'd shoot through a tunnel. And it was like a kaleidoscope. I began seeing all of these colors. And another time I wound up going right up through the roof and I was on my roof, the roof of my house. Now, what was amazing to me is that while I was up there, I was feeling the shingles on my roof, looking at the trees around me that surround the home. And I didn't know what this was. I just assumed it had to be some type of crazy dream. Remember, there was no internet. I couldn't go look it up. I couldn't type it into a search bar. I really didn't even tell anybody. I didn't tell my family because I didn't know what to tell them. So I later realized, of course, that I was having out-of-body experiences, which I continuously do have them every now and then. I don't have them when I want to have them. I wish I could. I would do it every night, although they tell us that we do travel out of body every night. But that's another story. I have plenty of stories that I could share, and I will, but I like to keep videos on the shorter end. Okay, so that was the first thing that was happening to me. Now I'm going to fast forward to the end of my senior year. It was May. And I had free periods on a Friday. I was able to sign myself out because I was 18 years old. And my plan was to go down to our beach house. So I grabbed my dog, got in the car, packed my bag. But before I left, I stopped at the cemetery in the town next door where my mother's father's family are all buried. It's my great-great-grandparents, my great-grandparents, my grandparents, and aunts and uncles in a very, very large grave. Anyway, why was I going there? Well, because I had a car and a license and the ability to get around, and I was just curious. I said, I want to go visit the family plot. And I didn't have this thinking that, like, they're there or anything like that. I didn't know what to think. So I didn't know any of them. They all passed before I was born, with the exception of my grandmother, but I was 2 when she passed, so other than a few visual images of her, I didn't know her. But they were wonderful people. And I kept hearing stories growing up, especially my great-grandfather, who was like the patriarch of the family. He was a very successful businessman, and in the Depression, he helped so many people by helping pay their rent, helping put food on the table, helping people start businesses, paying off mortgages. I mean, he was a true philanthropist and all self-made. So I didn't know him. He had died in 1940, but I heard wonderful stories from everybody who did know him. And when I was a kid, some of his contemporaries were, they were old, but they were still around because he died at the age of 56. My grandfather, again, I didn't know him. He passed before I was born. So why was I going there? I felt like I knew these people. I had heard all about them. In fact, growing up in a family home, an ancestral home, which is what I live in now to this day. So after that, after I visit the family plot, I decide I want to go find my uncle's plot who had passed the year before. His name was Uncle Chicky. I thought I knew where it was. It's a huge cemetery. I couldn't find it. So I leave there, I get on the road, and I head down to the beach house. When I pull up to the beach house, one of the boys from my neighborhood, who was a few years younger than I, and his friend had been continuously playing with the Ouija board. They were totally into that for whatever, well, I shouldn't say for whatever reason, because the boy in my neighborhood had lost his grandfather, his stepfather, his real father, and his cousin in a 3-year period. Now that's a lot to go through for a boy that age. So in retrospect, obviously I know why they were engaging with the Ouija board. But I didn't think it was healthy, and I thought it was a bunch of nonsense. So I walked up on the porch and I said, guys, what are you doing with this Ouija board? I said, this isn't good. I said, and besides, it's a bunch of nonsense, and I'm going to show you it is. So I said, ask it if there's a spirit of mine on the board. Now, very important that you understand that the two of them, first of all, did not come from my town, knew nothing of my mother's family, her maiden name, none of the relatives, didn't know where I was that day or didn't know anything I was doing. They were 16, I was 18. And so they had their hands on the planchet of the Ouija board. I was just standing there like this, a true skeptic. So they asked if there was a spirit of mine on the board. It went to yes. So I'm like, all right, who? Well, it spells out Grandpa and the family last name. And I was stunned because I'm like, wait a minute. How do they know his last name and spell it correctly? Because I knew immediately it was my great-grandfather, the patriarch, because my grandfather was always referred to as Poppy, and he was Grandpa. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what's going on here? How is this possible? Now, in my mind, I know that I visited his grave that day, so that was really making it weird. So I'm thinking to myself, are my thoughts going through them and affecting the board? I didn't know what to think. I was stunned. And remember, I'm not doing it. They are. If I were touching it, I would have dismissed the whole thing because I would have said, oh, but I know these answers. It's my subconscious mind is moving it. But I wasn't. So knowing that I was at the cemetery that day, my mind says, all right, ask where you were today. And in my mind, I said, okay, where was I today? I ask out loud. And in my mind, I'm focusing on the word cemetery because I somehow or another think that I'm having some type of power over this. It spells out the name of the city where my train gets out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I was there. Where else was I today? And I'm focusing on cemetery, cemetery, cemetery. It spells out the name of the city where my school is. And I'm like, well, yeah, I was there too. Now I'm getting really crazy. I'm like, where specifically was I? And I'm like looking at it, shouting at it. And what it said next changed my life. He spelled out, with me. And I still feel, goosebumps. In a good way, of course. And I looked at them both and I said, I visited his grave today. And their faces dropped because how did they? They didn't know anything, little alone that they didn't know his name or how to spell it. Nor do they know the names of the cities and the places that I was at all day that day. So then I said, all right, well, who was I looking for today? Now, this is where it got really intriguing. It spelled out Uncle Chicky. So what that told me is that obviously there's more going on than we know in reality. There's some unseen world, something more than we know. But it also knows what I'm thinking. Because I never said I was looking for Uncle Chicky. I never told anybody. The last place I was at was the cemetery, and I drove straight down to the shore. And all of a sudden, this board is telling me everything I did. So I finally opened up to the realization that there's more to reality than we know. And that obviously there's life after death or I know some people say, well, you're going to get a fake spirit who's going to pretend to be, and I'm not endorsing the Ouija board, mind you. I think it's a portal. You could speak to real people, but yes, you could also allow some very low-lying spirits into your house, into your world. So I don't recommend it unless you know exactly what you're doing. It's not something that I do. Well, anyway, it changed my life. And from that point forward, I began to experience in my family home, especially, along with members of my family, amazing signs from the ancestors that they would leave. Signs that were so telling that there was no questioning it was they, based upon what was happening. And believe me, I can go on for hours on these stories, and I do plan on sharing a great deal with them, and here's why. So just like the reason I started this channel, is that we are spiritual beings. We are infinite. This is just the body we use while we're here, but within us is a perfect spirit body, an astral body, whatever you wish to call it. And I've had those experiences because years later, when I finally found out that what was happening to me was an out-of-body experience, well, then I started reading books on it. I read Dr. Monroe's book, and all sorts of other books, and just try to learn everything I could about it, and then how to have more conscious experiences, which I've had. And again, I will share all of this to you because I want all of you to know that there is no such thing as death. Death is an illusion that is experienced only by those of us who remain here when the other person's spirit body leaves their physical body. That's all that happens. And I've read through thousands of near-death experiences. You can go online now, you can watch as many as you can, and keep watching because you'll realize that people from all sorts of backgrounds, all different cultures, all sorts of religions, including atheists, have near-death experiences, come back and report that there's this other world that felt like home, and it was more real there than it is here, because you are expanded in consciousness. You're not being limited by the physical body anymore, but yet you're still you. You maintain your identity, your memories, your loves, you maintain your personality. It's just an amazing experience. So that's my story. That's where it all started, and of course it continued on for over 30 years, and I wish to share as much of this with you all to help you all on your spiritual journey so that you can grow and follow whatever path it is that your guides or your higher self are setting you up. And have the experiences that you came here to experience, because when we do depart this realm, from what I've learned, it's not a surprise to us. We planned it that way from the beginning, just like we kind of plan out our life and the life we want to live and the experiences we wish to have. But yet, when we get here, we have to forget about all that, or else the point of it doesn't work. And we wouldn't want to be here. We'd want to go back home. That's why we forget. But we have those experiences, and when we return back home to the spirit, then that's when we evaluate that did we learn what we set out to learn? Did we grow in the way that we wished to have grown? That's where all that stuff gets taken care of, is when we go back home to spirit and you're reunited with all of your loved ones and tons of people that you forgot you knew, but they're friends and family in your spirit world. So it's great. And I'll share, as I say, so much of this with you. But anyway, if you enjoy this content, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with other people to open their eyes, because right now we're in a great awakening going on this planet, and more people are starting on a spiritual path. My hope is that my experiences and what I share with everybody can assist you in your own personal growth. So that is my hope and prayer for all of you, as I am in service to all of you. So I'll see you next time. Enjoy life, folks. That's what it's all about. Take care.